Mm.
Right. Well, welcome everyone. My name's Amanda Williams, and I'm here with Jim Zobel, and we're both historians here at the MacArthur Memorial. And today we're going to be focusing on Arthur MacArthur Jr., the father of Douglas MacArthur, and Philippine revolutionary leader General Emilio Aguinaldo. In 1901, during the Philippine-American War, then Governor General of the Philippines, Brigadier General Arthur MacArthur Jr., approved a very daring plan by Frederick Funston to capture Emilio Aguinaldo. And once Aguinaldo was in custody, Arthur MacArthur then persuaded him to swear allegiance to the United States and to use his influence to help end the Philippine-American War. So, what do we know about the discussions between these two men? How did they see the future of the Philippines? And how did this particular event and time in the Philippines then influence Douglas MacArthur's vision of Philippine independence? So, that's what we're going to talk about today. So, Jim, it's 1901 in the Philippines. The Philippine-American War has been going on for a few years. Can you set the stage for us? How would you characterize the war at this point in time, and what roles are Arthur MacArthur and Emilio Aguinaldo playing at this point?
1899, the war had started in February, and Elwell S. Otis was the commander at that point. And it was once it erupted on 4 February, then it became a concentrated drive by the Americans to wipe out Aguinaldo's army. Uh, Arthur MacArthur was one of the brigade commanders that makes the drive or in the early days. He'll eventually become like commander of the 2nd Division. But from February through basically November of 1899, that's when they're really hammering the Filipinos all the way up to Lingayen Gulf, where Dagupan is. And that's where MacArthur makes his headquarters in World War II after the landing. And Aguinaldo knows he's getting creamed. They've had inter-fighting in between the guerrillas themselves. They're getting just wiped out by the Americans. And so Aguinaldo in November goes guerrilla and tells everybody to disband. So from that point, Aguinaldo is pretty much unknown. Nobody knows where he is. We know that the Americans at that time knew that he still had contacts with the various guerrilla groups who have also gone into the mountains, all these commanders and all their men to try and avoid the Americans. And during that period, Arthur MacArthur will take over as the military governor. Otis will leave in about May of 1900, and MacArthur will then be the military governor. But right after MacArthur is selected as military governor in June of 1900, the Second Philippine Commission shows up, and that's the one that's headed by William Howard Taft. Now, there had been a first commission under this guy, Schurzman, but Otis ignored them the whole time. Taft shows up, and he's pretty powerful. He's got the backing of most of the administration. And the thing is in 1900, they were thinking that the war was over because that's what Otis had told everyone when he went back to the United States. Arthur MacArthur, when they go guerrilla, he tries a soft policy. He tries to offer them amnesty. The guerrillas, come in, give in your weapons, we'll let you go. They start public health campaigns, schools, municipal governments in all these various areas. He'll start as well putting out American garrisons to, monitoring this guerrilla warfare that's going on. But he's trying to use a soft approach, which really kind of ticks off Taft because Taft is more, let's get this thing over with. And a lot of the other Army officers are that same way. But Arthur MacArthur had always been, we're here to help these people. We're not here to terrorize them. And so in September of 1900, they're waiting for that next election to come along. And William Jennings Bryan running for the Democrats. And it's in the Americas, there's this imperialist versus anti-imperialist fervor going on between different groups. The administration is the imperialist side. You've got all these Democrats as well as people like Mark Twain, Carnegie, others that are against us taking over the Philippines. And Aguinaldo's people and the guerrillas are really clued into that. They figure, if we can hold out till a Democrat wins, they're going to get rid of this policy of expansion. They'll pull the troops out. And so Arthur MacArthur was trying that like soft policy because he knew that they couldn't get the guerrillas to surrender at that point while they're waiting for that election. September 1900, he sends this report to Washington that says, this thing is far from over. The guerrillas aren't surrendering. The administration stifles that till after the election, and then anti-imperialist papers go crazy over that, accuse Arthur MacArthur of that. But in November, December, that's when the hard policy starts. And MacArthur puts out this no, December 20th proclamation that you're not a legitimate fighting force anymore. From now on, it's not defense, it's murder if you're killing, people from ours. They come up with these treason laws. Taft as well wants to start deporting people. They captured Aguinaldo's main lawyer, this guy Mabini, who was really kind of the brains behind things. They deported him to Guam. And so by 1901, with these new policies as well as the garrisoning that's going on, you're getting a lot of surrenders of Philippine guerrillas. And so by 1901, Taft and that civilian commission, they're seeing it as over. They're seeing this thing as winding down. MacArthur is the military commander. It really is a constitutional thing that the president has him as the military governor, and they have to create a special amendment, the Spooner Amendment, to put Taft and the civilian commission in control over Arthur MacArthur. They know they're going to get rid of him in early of 1901. So by 1901, a lot of that American group is looking at it as over. They've created the Federal Party in Manila, which are the wealthy elites of Philippine society who are now trying to promote this party of going along with the Americans. Aguinaldo, in hiding, will say that these people are all traitors. He'll say we have to capture more Americans to be able to, put this to the test. They'll put a lot of more pressure on the civilian population of the Philippines. And so, as it is in any war like that, the civilian population is catching it from both the American side as well as the Philippine guerrilla side. So by 1901, you've got a lot of Americans thinking it's over. You've got Arthur MacArthur saying you probably still got a lot more warfare to go, which you did. But you've also got Aguinaldo, who's still, even other people are surrendering. He's not looking at surrendering.
When we were doing some research over the last week, just going back to when you mentioned Arthur MacArthur, very interested in kind of soft power approaches. Apparently, he told his staff at one point, American institutions are on trial, not the Filipino people. And that's kind of the lens through which he wanted to kind of view what they were trying to do in the Philippines. Okay, so we know that Arthur MacArthur was quite a scholar. He was a researcher. During this time, we know that he had a standing order with a bookseller in Hong Kong for every book that was published on the Far East. And we know that he had a particular interest in colonial administration. So every book coming out about this part of the world, he was receiving during this time, and we know he was reading them. Do we know how he viewed the Filipino people? And do we know how he viewed Aguinaldo?
Well, that quote that you just had about American institution, that kind of shows it right there. He and his father especially believed that Americanism needed to be spread, because he thought it was like one of the best systems of government there was. And, whether Arthur MacArthur believes that, I think Arthur MacArthur looks at the Philippines in the sense of that expansionism of commerce and capital, because when you're producing so much back at home that you've produced more than the country needs, that leads to depression, that leads to the violent gang strikes, a labor movement that is so prevalent at that period. And he believes if you have these overseas markets, you can tamp that down within America. And so he looks at the Philippines in that way. As far as the Filipinos, the elites, that are wanting to go along with the Americans, he'll say, they're eager for you know, us to take over. They're eager to learn self-government. And he does believe that. He's not a colonialist, he's a capitalist, but he doesn't believe America will come there and just run it for the rest of time. He believes if you can, because he sees the Ilustrados as doctors and lawyers and what we've always known, but he he believes it'll take time, and so that's why they start his municipal governments, educating people to how to run, governments, the creation of this federal party. Uh, Aguinaldo, he will eventually come to say he's a very wise man when he comes back to the States and lands there. People, that's the main thing we want to know, because MacArthur had spent so much time with him in those months prior to his leaving in July of 1901, and he'll say he thinks he's a wise man. Funston, who captures him, says he's the best Filipino that he had been brought into contact with. After he had captured him. Of course, you've got Teddy Roosevelt. I mean, he calls Filipinos savages. He equates them to the Apaches in the American West. Samuel B. Young, who's the Department of the North, he reads a lot of that colonial administration of English and British and how they put down uprisings, and he's all for these harsher methods. I think Arthur MacArthur knows that if you push him too far, you're just going to alienate him for forever. And so I think it's kind of this mixed look at how he looks at the whole situation. He thinks it's good for America, but he, he doesn't want to be this brutal occupier, and that's what he's always saying to him. We didn't come here to terrorize them. We came to help them.
Hmm. Now, I read in the General's General, which is the biography of Arthur MacArthur, that the Filipino military commanders viewed Arthur as the most able of the American military officers in the Philippines. Why did they think that? And do we know what Aguinaldo thought of MacArthur?
Well, compared to Otis, I'd have to say that Arthur MacArthur was way more competent. Otis was a guy who was always of mass caution, would stop operations right when they were about to, be most successful. Henry Lawton, who came out there, he was the guy who captured Geronimo, and had been in Cuba, but he had some problems, and they sent him out there, and he was always in fights with Otis. They called him a train upside down, going, 1,000 miles an hour. But Arthur MacArthur, his drive north, the Filipinos recognize it because he uses the same system Sherman did, in the Civil War, where the railroad line is the main base. You run up, you use that as your supply line. He uses cavalry operations off to the side, brings in naval support as they're moving up in those areas close to Manila Bay. He creates a Department of Military Information because there's no like Secret Service or intelligence branch at that point, but they know in this new atmosphere of this foreign entanglement, guerrilla warfare that they're going to get into, that they need that. So he's a very capable person, but they also see, there's so much brutality. I mean, there's no way to get beyond it. The casualty rates of Filipinos, I mean, they were just getting slaughtered by Americans, and the Filipinos, I think, knew that he was not for this, just because of the many orders that he pulled out. He would have people arrested if they violated the laws of war as he saw them. At least during that time when the Republican Army was together, once they became guerrillas, he thought they were just bandits, basically. But I would think it's in that sense, just because within a few months, his campaign destroyed the Republican Army, basically. And Aguinaldo will call him a fair man, that he believed he was, and that's because as soon as he's brought into contact with him, just as he was with Funston, they weren't a bunch of wild, crazy people. Oh, we're gonna kill you and we're gonna lock up your family and everybody else. They were they were very logical, fair-minded people, and they talked to Aguinaldo as if he was a president.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And what I think is interesting too is, there's evidence of Arthur MacArthur instructing his staff and I guess his forces in general, to be polite to Filipinos, especially to Filipinos trying to work with them or Filipinos coming to meet with him. I mean, they're standing orders basically that you're going to treat the Filipinos just like you would treat anybody else, back in the States. And so, I mean, I imagine that goes a long way as well with how
Well,
some of the Filipinos
Young,
viewed him.
his biographer Young, as well as Douglas MacArthur, said that was the main lesson they learned from Arthur MacArthur. It was that you're always a gentleman at all times. Uh,
Hmm.
you're always calm. You never fly off the handle. You always keep, control of your emotion as well as your fear, which plays very well on the battlefield, um, especially. But also that is the way of command. Basically, people said that he could, you knew when he was serious because he'd get real low in low tone.
Mm.
And that was his way of command. And people understood it because he had the reputation to back it up. I mean, all those campaigns, he's not sitting in Manila with Otis. He's up there with the troops, Uh, get up there 40 feet ahead, take that position. And so Arthur MacArthur's he's a stand-up guy. Now, we talked about what does he think about Filipinos, and there has been criticism that, and even Taft said, he's so imperious. He doesn't um, stomach any slight to his position or, the respect that he feels he's due. And he believed in these Filipinos that were eager for self-government and whatnot. But the criticism was that if they were anyway in ulterior thinking to his, he was quick to correct them and point that out that his way was the best way. So I mean, he is a gentleman and whatnot, but uh, you can see a lot of that in Douglas MacArthur
Right.
as
And is it
well.
Taft? Is Taft the one that kind of makes the joke that, Arthur MacArthur thinks he's an expert on the Filipinos?
Yeah, and he says that
Yeah.
to somebody after only being in the Philippines for like a week.
Yes.
I mean, Arthur MacArthur's been there for a year dealing with these people, and Taft shows up. Like, I know more than he, and that's the thing that comes between them is those two guys think they're the most, you know, well-learned, brilliant
Mhm.
people on the
Yeah. A lot
planet.
of friction there.
Yeah.
Now this is off topic, but it just popped in my head. Do you think if Pinky, Arthur MacArthur's wife, who was very vivacious, very good at diplomacy, do you think if she had come to the Philippines, do you think
Yes,
she
and
could have
that's
buffered the Taft Arthur
yeah.
MacArthur friction?
I think that's what Young says.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because Funston's wife is there. All those other people's
Hmm.
wives are there, and that's the way it was in those days. A lot of those guys that go to the Boxer Rebellion, all their wives go to Japan, and so
Right.
I think it was something that really hurt him because
Right.
later on when Douglas MacArthur is chief of staff or when he's at West Point, she's the one who handles all the social affairs because he's incapable of it. His whole mind is military thinking, and that's what Taft said. His whole mind was military thinking. And even the other aside from I think Pinky could have helped. The thing is even though that Taft has all these criticisms of Arthur MacArthur about his manner and the way he carries himself, just always military, he says that he was very helpful to the commission.
Mm.
So it's like I can say all these things to you, but I'm also helping you
Mm.
the whole time. Yeah.
Right. Okay. Sorry for that diversion. We'll get back to the topic. So February 1901, a force under the command of Frederick Funston captures a courier that was used by Aguinaldo. And this leads to the development of a daring plan to capture Aguinaldo himself. And Arthur MacArthur approves of this operation. Tell us what happens.
Funston is just something else. You want to read about some guy, this guy's the guy. I mean, the Cuban Revolution is going on in Cuba, that starts the Spanish-American War, and he's not a military guy really, but he's like, I want to go down there, and so he learns everything there is to learn about artillery and becomes an artillery expert, and goes down there, And then he's so good at what he does, the Kansas, people pick him to run their regiment that comes over to the Philippines. And he's one of the most resourceful officers that Arthur MacArthur has. These guys are connected. Funston will name his son Arthur after Arthur MacArthur. And yes, February of 1901, that's that point where they're trying to really press the guerrillas and get this thing over with. And that's what they all want to do, is get it over with. And they do. They capture this guy, Cecilio Segismundo or something like that, who had all these dispatches from Aguinaldo that were going to these other guerrilla commanders. And so they come up with a plan. The thing is through those dispatches, they figure out he's in this place called Palanan, which is right on the upper east coast of Luzon. And there's no way to get it except for like a few mountain trails that come to it. It's just a few miles inland, but you have to go through areas that are easily watched because there's only a couple of ways to get in there. So Funston gets together with Arthur MacArthur, says, I'm going to put this plan together. I'm going to get the Navy. We're going to take a coastal steamer that'll go around to the other side. The thing is they can't land where Palanan is because they'll be seen. And Americans had tried that before, not knowing Aguinaldo was there, and he just went up in the mountains and hid, then came back. And the thing is, he's totally in hiding. Nobody there knows that that's Aguinaldo. That's how they're keeping it so secret, and even though it's in this town. So Funston says, let's go up. We'll land at this, what is it, Casa something bay that he's going to land at Casaguran Bay, which is like 110 miles from Palanan. And so he gets all these Macabebe scouts. Macabebes had been loyal to the Spanish. They were this area north of Luzon, and the Spanish, I guess the priests there or the institutions they had there were really kind to the people, and they were really one-on-one. So as soon as Spanish surrendered to the Americans, the Macabebes went to work for them. So Funston, 4 other officers, and 80 Macabebe scouts, and then a couple of Spanish guys that were working with the Americans, and then a few Tagalogs. They go with Funston on this Vicksburg, USS Vicksburg, get landed 110 miles away. Funston's going to act as prisoners. What they've done is they've captured stationery from the commander of Nueva Vizcaya province, this General Lucan. And they write all these letters to Funston saying, hey, we're bringing these prisoners and we're going to have some reinforcements come for your guard. And so they've machinated it so that Aguinaldo is expecting this group to show up. Now, they make this week-long journey through the trails to get to Palanan. Funston said he was starving the whole time. The ruse works. They get there. None of the scouts turn on them. They're all loyal to Funston, and they get there. They capture Aguinaldo. He can't believe what's going on. Is this a joke? No, it's not. They killed a few people. They took all the prisoners. Vicksburg shows up right off the coast of Palanan. They get on that, and the 28th of May or 28th of March, they're back in Manila Bay. And so it's just a couple of weeks by sheer audacity, boldness, and luck. They pull this capture of Aguinaldo off. I think it's along with his father's assault on Missionary Ridge in Civil War. I think this action by Funston is the most influential thing on Douglas MacArthur. Mm. Because if you look at MacArthur's whole career, it's all, in order to change the odds, do things, it's all bold action. And I think that all comes from, his dad, Funston, these people that he will look to as his peers. And so, there we are. Funston's pulled off this amazing feat. He'll get a brigadier generalship in the U.S. Army, a regular commission. He'll be awarded the Medal of Honor for actions that he had taken earlier on. He'll get, complete praise from President Roosevelt. And before, they had just thought he was a wild man and somebody that couldn't be tamed. He'll go on to fame after that. During the San Francisco earthquake and fire, when the people right after it started losing their minds, looting started going in, Funston comes in with the army. Nope, not going to happen. Lays down the law, gets them all food, gets them all working. I mean, sometimes you need somebody like that. To me, he's he's a man.
I think you're right, though. I mean, I think MacArthur, we know he looked up to his dad, but I mean, I think Funston must stand out in his mind too as like another person to look up to and try to emulate. Because I mean,
Well,
he certainly tries to do stuff like that in his early career.
especially when he's at Veracruz
Yes, that's what I
and
was thinking.
Funston's the commander, and
Yes,
he's like, I got to do something like he did,
yes,
you know,
yes,
at that. And I think that that's totally on it.
yeah. So, okay, Funston brings Aguinaldo into Manila. Describe the first meeting between Arthur MacArthur and Aguinaldo.
Funston and Aguinaldo and a couple other guys, they get on the steam launch, and the the Pasig River in Manila goes right to Malacañang Palace, where Arthur MacArthur is living. And it used to be like the Spanish where they controlled it from. And so he pulls the steam launch right up to the basically the front porch of Malacañang and said that Arthur MacArthur came out in a wrapper. I guess that's like a bathrobe. He wasn't dressed. And he's like, "What are you doing here?" And he's like, "Well, I've got, Aguinaldo over in this house over here." And Arthur MacArthur's like, "What?" It goes and gets dressed and then goes over there and they both total gentlemen. And they said Aguinaldo was all clammed up, but then they had breakfast and he started easing up, realizing these guys aren't going to throw him in chains or, garrote him or give him the water torture or any of these other horrible things they have. And one of the first things Arthur MacArthur says is, I'm gonna get your family in here, so you can talk to them. Aguinaldo had abandoned them in November 1899, basically told his 18-year-old wife and kid, go surrender. Hold them off while I get out of here. But they come to visit him. They're all, you've got to go with the Americans now. Most of his cabinet had been captured. They all come to visit him. He's living right there at Malacañang. They're trying to convince him to, go with the Americans. And Arthur MacArthur is talking to him every day. We're here for, to eventually give you self-government. We're not here to, establish American rule for forever. This is not going to be our colony. He's trying to, reason with him because he believes that, both he and Funston believe if they can get him to agree to going along with the Americans, that will go a long way to ending this war, and ending all the fighting. You know, they're,
Yeah. I
they're
mean, Arthur, he's clearly has a different idea though than maybe other American officers or even diplomats in that area. You've got William Howard Taft weighing in and saying we should just deport Aguinaldo right away. You've got
right.
Admiral Dewey saying we just need to execute him. And so here you have Arthur with a totally different idea. And I mean, how does do we know anything about the conversations that they had together while Aguinaldo's being held?
Well, we know that Arthur MacArthur's idea is to send Aguinaldo to America with Funston, like right away, and have them go there, explain what's going on, explain what's happened in the Philippines, try to awaken America to, what and Taft, Roosevelt, Secretary of War Elihu Root just think this is madness because this will play right into the hands of the anti-imperialists, the Democrats, the anti-administration people, and they just call him a buffoon and stupid for, this idea of sending, Aguinaldo away. Uh, Arthur MacArthur is more in the sense, let's just tell the truth.
Mhm.
Let's be honest about all this. And he'll get crucified for it. When he shows up in the United States, they completely ignore him. Um, no fanfare or anything in August of 1901. And I think, a lot has to maybe have to do with that. MacArthur and Aguinaldo, do they have the same vision? Are they friends? I don't know about that. But Arthur MacArthur definitely thought that would be a good thing, would be to send them both back to the United States to speak to Congress, about this war, and how the Filipinos wanted to now go along with them, and try to. I mean, there's going to be a lot more fighting. I mean, because General Malvar down in Batangas is now calls Aguinaldo a traitor, because he's going to
Right.
take the oath of allegiance and all that, and you've got the General Lukban on Samar, and these places are all going to go haywire, after Arthur MacArthur is gone, and then the serious, offensive pressure is going to be put on because Arthur MacArthur's not there to be against that anymore.
Mm,
And so then you're getting these orders on Samar, kill everybody over the age of 10,
mm,
every male over the age of 10. And I think that a lot of that is having to do with, Arthur MacArthur had this a different mindset than a lot of other people at that time.
mm. So just to backtrack a little bit, Aguinaldo is ultimately persuaded to swear allegiance to the United States and then to issue a proclamation calling on his followers to surrender. Arthur MacArthur, in return, agrees to begin releasing some prisoners,
Yep.
kind of in stages. And it's really a very remarkable agreement. I mean, when you think about where the US government really maybe wanted this to go and what Arthur and Aguinaldo seemed to do in those days together talking, um, how is, I think you've already touched on this a little bit, but how is this deal received by both sides from, an American standpoint and then maybe from a Philippine standpoint?
Well, I think the administration and Taft, and that commission, they see this as the end. That civil government can now take over. Taft had always wanted to, and the civilians wanted to create what a constabulary, like a police force that was run by the civil government. MacArthur and the army had created these Philippine scouts. They had created municipal police, but they were run by the military. And Taft wants to just use like a civilian run police and with thousands of people in it. So I think as far as the administration saw it, they saw it as the end of of the need for, the military hand. The military would be subservient to the civilian commissioners, and Elihu Root, the Secretary of War, had totally gone along with that. He wasn't looking out for the War Department's interests in the Philippines, which was Arthur MacArthur, and that's the way he saw it. He was, he had said, yeah, we'll go with the civilian commission that will run the Philippines at that time. And so I think that from the sense of the U.S. administration, they saw, the deal as just they already thought it was ending. And so they didn't think that the Aguinaldo surrender was that much more of a big deal. They thought it would help more, but they thought that, it was already ending anyway because of the pressure they had put on them, after November, December of 1900. And I think we said, the Filipinos, those that hadn't surrendered, they look at Aguinaldo's flip-flop as kind of like, okay, you're a traitor now, and they'll get kind of vicious, and then but the thing is that just brings on the most harsh retribution of the United States. You'll have problems down in Mindanao in 1903 through 1905. That's when John Pershing's over there, but this is more of a not so much the Revolutionary Army, but the Islamic populations of Yolo and Mindanao that are going to be the problems down there.
Mhm. So thinking about Douglas MacArthur now, I mean, obviously he idolizes his father, and obviously he's very aware of what's going on in the Philippines while his father is governor general. Later on in his life, and his father goes on that kind of fact-finding mission through Asia and kind of observes the end of the Russo-Japanese War. Douglas MacArthur's on that trip with his father, and in my mind, he comes back with a very nuanced view of race. This idea that your race doesn't determine your military capabilities, and he also comes back, I think, with a very distinct anti-colonial
Yeah.
streak. I think sometimes people point to that trip to Asia as the cause of that, but now I'm starting to wonder, do you think that's something that he gets from his father's experiences in the Philippines during this
I,
time?
I think a lot of it, sure. Yeah. And then traveling with the father, like
Right,
on the Asian trip that you're talking. The thing that I think they really see is just the unbridled poverty,
right,
this mass of people that is not coalesced into some kind of purpose. And they both see that once that is channeled, it is
mhm,
going to be the driving force of the world economy. It'll become the
right,
center of the world. And so that's why they look to Asia as that place America has to be in contact with, you know, whether, not warlike, but we have to talk, we have to, and I think MacArthur sees that people just want a roof over their head and some food and, to be left alone from war, but it's getting them coalesced into some spirit of working together. And I think he saw that they had such potential for greatness, but also potential for threat. If you
right.
coalesce them into a military might. I think he saw the Philippines as, the bastion of Christian westernized culture in Asia. Because it was a Christian nation. It's funny because when they were trying to figure out, a way to go against the imperialists, the people were like saying, let's Christianize the Philippines. It's like, they're already Catholic, you idiots.
Right.
So, it is this oddball country because of, Spain's, um, and then if you can give them that self-government on top of that Christian ideology, it MacArthur sees this as a very epic, special thing. And I think
Mhm.
that comes from maybe the father as well, that this is a very special opportunity to have this westernized civilization amidst Asia and to maybe somehow meld things, through that port.
Mhm.
It's like you said, he's definitely not a colonialist. I think in the 30s, he sees that a lot of the problems are coming because of the death of that system. That
Right.
a lot of these nationalistic fervors are going to be talking, coming to life, and he wanted the United States to be on the good side of that, on the friendly side of that. Um, and I think you're right. I think that along with a lot of other lessons, come from the father and
Mhm.
the grandfather, and it's just about how you deal with people. I mean,
Yeah.
when MacArthur's over there, that's one of the things the Americans stay with Americans, but he doesn't.
Mhm.
He's a friend to all the, Kay's, and I'd say that's probably more of an influence than the father even is, the friendship that starts with Kazan due to his dad, because his dad meets Kazan first, and then
Mhm.
MacArthur's first tour over there, he meets Kazan, and they become, you know, the that's his closest friend probably in his life is Kazan.
Right.
You know, and he's an independence minded guy too.
I think the people side of it is interesting because when you think about Douglas MacArthur and Arthur MacArthur, they they don't look at Asia as just resources like natural resources, rubber, or these other items that you could
Mm,
get from Asia. They are looking at it as people. And I think that's what makes them different sometimes in their kind of approach to their military duties in these areas because they are so incredibly conscious of the people,
yeah. And
not just the
commerce
things.
they believe I think that they're capitalists in the sense that they believe commerce
Good
is
for everyone.
yes, and it's something that free people are better at than slaves,
Right.
and I think that's the way they look at it, we sell, these people, we've got goods that will make their lives better. And I think that's the way they look at it. And it's better if they're free than slaves.
Right. All right.
At least that's what I get out of it, but I'm an idiot, so.
No, no. All right. Any final brilliant thoughts, Jim?
I have no brilliant thoughts. No, we get so wrapped up in World War II and World War I and Korea all the time, but this stuff to me is super interesting. Just how that all of it began. And if we hadn't taken the Philippines, what would have happened? Would the Germans have taken them? Would the Japanese have taken them? And if they had, what would that, if the Germans had taken them, then at the end of World War I, the Japanese would have taken over the Philippines because they got all the German mandates. And how would that have changed the dynamic of would they even gone to war in World War II? Because they already had the Philippines. So who knows? So
Fascinating.
yeah, it's a fun thing.
And here I thought you didn't like what ifs.
All
All right.
right.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jim, for taking the
Thank you so
time this
much.
morning.
Excellent.